Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar. Lalitam Sakati ki jai, Nitai Gaur Sundar ki jai, Go Prabhu.
That is put it here also. This one? Yeah. Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Sorry for the delay with the setup. Okay, so Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. So today we're reading from the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 30, the activities of the Prachetas, text number 49. I hope I'm heard okay. Mic setup is okay. Okay, so Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Chakshushe Tvantare Prapte Praksarge Kalavitrute Yasa Saja Praja Ishta Sadaksho Daivachoditaham Chakshushe Tvantare Prapte Praksarge Kalavidrute Yasa Saja Praja Ishta Sadaksho Daivachoditaham Chakshushe Tvantare Prapte Praksarge Kalavidrute Yasasarja Praja Ishta Sadaksho Daiva Choditaha. Word-to-word translation. Chakshushe, named Chakshusha. 2. But Antare, the Manvantara. Prapte, when it happened. Prak, previous. Sarge, creation. Kalavidrute, destroyed in due course of time. Yaha, one who. Sasarja, created. Praja, living entities. Ishta, desirable. Sa, he. Daksha, Daiva, by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Choditaha, inspired. Translation. His previous body had been destroyed, but he, the same Daksha, inspired by the Supreme Will, created all the desired living entities in the Chakshusha Manvantara. Purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 8:17, Sahasra Yuga Haryantam Ahar Yad Brahmano Vidu Ratrim Yuga Sahasrantam Teho Ratra Vidojana. By human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together in the duration of Brahma's one day, and such also is the duration of his night. Brahma's one day consists in 1,000 cycles of the 4 yugas, Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali. In that one day, there are 14 manvantars, and out of these manvantars, this Chakshusha Manvantara is the 6th. The various manus existing in one day of Lord Brahma are as follows. First, Swayambhuva Manu. Second, Svarojisha. Third, Uttama. Fourth, Tamasa. Fifth, Raivata. Sixth, Chakshusha. Seventh, Vaivasvata. Eighth, Savarni. Ninth, Daksha Savarni. 10, Brahma Savarni. 11, Dharma Savarni. 12, Rudra Savarni. 13, Deva Savarni. And 14th, Indra Savarni. Thus, there are 14 manus in one day of Brahma. In a year, there are 5,040 manus. Brahma has to live for 100 years. Consequently, the total of Manus appearing and disappearing during the life of one Brahma is 504,000. This is the calculation for the universe, and there are innumerable universes. All these Manus come and go simply by the breathing process of Mahavishnu, as stated in the Brahma Samhita. Yasyai kanishvatishtakala mathavalambya jivanti loma vijaya Jagadantanatha Vishnur Mahansa Ihasyasya Kala Vishesho Govindamari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. The word Jagadantanatha means Lord Brahma. There are innumerable Jagadantanatha Brahmas, and thus we can calculate the many Manus. The present age is under the control of Vaivasvata Manu. Each Manu lives 4,320,000 years multiplied by 71. The present Manu has already lived for 4,320,000 years multiplied by 28. All these long lifespans are ultimately ended by the laws of material nature. The controversy of the Daksha Yagya took place in the Swayambhuva Manvantara, which means the first month. Period. As a result, Daksha was punished by Lord Shiva, but by virtue of his prayers to Lord Shiva, he became eligible to regain his former opulence. According to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Daksha underwent severe penances up to the 5th Manvantara. Thus, at the beginning of the 6th Manvantara, known as Chakshusha Manvantara, Daksha regained his former opulence by the blessings of Lord Shiva. End of the purport. Verse again. Chakshushe tvantare prapte praksarge kala vidrute yasa sasaja praja ishta sadaksho daiva choditaha. His previous body had been destroyed, but he, the same Daksha, inspired by the supreme will, created all the desired living entities in the Chakshusha Manvantara. Right. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandjana Shlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishta Tapitam Yena Bhutale Swayarupa Kadama Yam Dadati Swapadantikam Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitana Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunnavadi Pashatya Deshatarine. Hare Krishna dear devotees, good morning. So the beautiful verse in Srimad Bhagavatam that we are reading today, and it made me think and remember another testimony in Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, how this reincarnation process takes place of different great sages and rishis and kings, but also not incarnations. There's also preservation of the transcendental knowledge that they have received. So it made me think, this particular verse and purport made me remember the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the pastimes of Matsya Avatar, and how King Satyavrata was not only saved by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but how after being saved, he has received the transcendental knowledge. So I'll just read the little extract from the story so you can remember. So the Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, and thus he taught Maharaj Satyavrata and the saintly persons about Vedic knowledge from the core of the heart. King Satyavrata took his next birth as Vaivasvata Manu, who is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Vivasvan Manave Praha. The sun god spoke the science of Bhagavad Gita to his son. Being the son of Vivasvan, this Manu is known as Vaivasvata Manu. Therefore, the Supreme Personality of a fish, and that's, sorry, I didn't read it in a consequent order, that was before. The Supreme Personality of Godhead took the incarnation of a fish at the beginning of the period of Swayambhuva Manu and saved the Vedas. During the reign of Chakshusha Manu, there was a king named Satyavrata, who was a great ruler. To save him, the Lord appeared as a fish incarnation for the second time. King Satyavrata later became the son of the sun god and was known as Shradadeva. He was established as Manu by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's very interesting to see how we have everything in order in Vedic literature, and there is a transcendental plan of how to pass the Vedic wisdom and Vedic knowledge, not just Vedic knowledge, the transcendental knowledge through the highest kings and devotees of the Lord, demigods also. So right there in Bhagavad Gita, what this Srimad Bhagavatam verse I just read was referring to is the first verse of the 4th chapter, where we have this whole system described and those same names mentioned. So the verse is Shri Bhagavan Vacham Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Aham Avyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manur Ikshva Kavet Pravit. The personality of God and Lord Shri Krishna said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivasvan, and Vivasvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. So what I'm fascinated about is that not only we can see the testimony of the actual reincarnation process, we also see, just a second, I'll fix it. Okay. So not only I'm inspired that there's a testimony in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam how those different personalities have taken birth, but also how the spiritual knowledge is actually preserved. In that 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 24th chapter, Matsya, the Lord Fish Incarnation, there was a verse saying that King Satyavrata was illuminated with all Vedic knowledge by the mercy of Lord Vishnu. And in this period, he has now taken birth as Vivasvata Manu, the son of the sun god. So it's actually mentioned in the verse itself. And this verse there, verse 55, the Supreme Personality of Godhead thus explained to King Satyavrata the spiritual science known as Sankhya Yoga, the science by which one distinguishes between matter and spirit. In other words, Bhakti Yoga, along with the instructions contained in the Puranas, the old histories, and the Samhitas. The Lord explained himself in all these literatures. While sitting in the boat, King Satyavrata, accompanied by the great saintly persons, listened to the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in regard to self-realization. These instructions were all from the eternal Vedic literature of Brahma. Thus, the king and sages had no doubt about the absolute truth. Yes. So, and then there are blessings that, if one hears this narration very attentively, is delivered from the reactions of sinful life. And yes. And then at the end, the last verse says here, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who pretended to be a gigantic fish, who restored the Vedic literature to Lord Brahma, when Lord Brahma awakened from sleep and who explained the essence of Vedic literature to King Satyavrata and the great saintly persons, because he was not alone on that boat. Do you remember? There were many brahmanas and rishis accompanying him in that inundation of the material universe, the partial inundation. And so not only we can see that a Lord indeed, as later described in the Bhagavad Gita, comes to protect his devotees. And in that category of devotees, there are many categories. There are demigods, there are, pure devotees, there are devotees that still have some desires, they're pious kings, or devotee kings. So there's different categories, and the Lord comes and protects them all. And in this case, he personally came as a little fish. As you remember, he found a fish in a pond, and the fish asked for protection. He put it in a jug, and then in a jug it grew, and it put it in a well it grew, then it put it in a lake it grew. It was always not enough space for the fish, and then he put it in a sea, and even in the sea it was not enough for the Lord. So then he understood this is not an ordinary fish, it must be Supreme Personality of Godhead. So and then when he received those spiritual instructions, we can see how those instructions were preserved. When the Lord says that my devotee will never perish, or Arjuna, please disclaim this boldly, that means that not the body, okay, he saved the body of Satyavrata, King Satyavrata, but eventually he died. In terms of the body died. Okay, he was saved temporarily by the Lord, which is great, but then the body died. But what was remained with him is that spiritual knowledge. How? We can see it in Bhagavad Gita, the verse we are reading right now. It's the first verse. Look how Prabhupada extremely deeply explains and interprets. Herein we find the history of Bhagavad Gita traced from a remote time when it was delivered to the royal order of all planets, beginning from the sun planet. The kings of all planets are especially meant for the protection of their inhabitants. And therefore, the royal order should understand the science of Bhagavad Gita in order to be able to rule the citizens and protect them from the material bondage of lust. Human life is meant for cultivation of spiritual knowledge in eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the executive heads of all states and all planets are obliged to impart this lesson to the citizens by education, culture, and devotion. Education, culture, and devotion. What a wonderful combination. In other words, the executive heads of all states are intended to spread the science of Krishna consciousness so that the people may take advantage of this great science and pursue a successful path, utilizing the opportunity of the human form of life. And then Prabhupada quotes another verse from Brahma Samhita 552, where it's explained that I'll just read the translation. Let me worship, Lord Brahma said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda Krishna, who is the original person and under whose order the sun, which is the king of all planets, is assuming immense power and heat. The sun represents the eye of the Lord and traverses its orbit in obedience to his order. We know there's another verse in Bhagavad Gita when Krishna says, I am the sun and the moon, or the sunlight and the moonshine. So I am that planet. So here's Lord Brahma says the same thing. The sun is the king of the planets, and the sun god, at present of the name Vivasvan, rules the sun planet, which is controlling all other planets by supplying heat and light. He's rotating under the order of Krishna, and Lord Krishna originally made Vivasvan his first disciple to understand the science of Bhagavad Gita. The Gita is not, therefore, a speculative treatise for the insignificant mundane scholar, but a standard book of knowledge coming down from the immemorial. And then he started to quote those years that actually that when the sun god Vivasvan received that knowledge was 120 million years ago, and then on the earth planet by his son Manu, who was Satyavrata in a previous age, in an age of the sixth Manu, which was Chakshusha. So then he became Vaivasvata. So he actually not only, look, it's very interesting, not only he preserved the spiritual knowledge by again gaining it from his father, the sun god, 2 million years ago, and then he said it to his son Ikshvaku. He also, in fact, raised his position in the material world. Also, his responsibility grew from being a king. He now became a Manu, who's the forefather of all humankind, humans. And Ikshvaku became a king of earth. So you can see there's like no loss on the spiritual path in any aspect and regard. But of course, for me, the most fascinating is how this spiritual knowledge is preserved. I have heard the stories of Prabhupada disciples being born again. There was a famous example with Raghava and Revati. I think it was written even in Back to Godhead magazine. It was a famous story of apparently Prabhupada disciple taking birth as a lady, but remembering his past life, and he took initiation from Bhaktacharya Swami Maharaj. She took initiation from Bhaktacharya Maharaj, but the same knowledge remained, and his connection with Prabhupada remained through Guru Parampara. So this is I think it's very fascinating that a devotee is never lost to the spiritual knowledge. Yes, ideally we should go back to Godhead in this lifetime as per Prabhupada request and bless it at the same time if we follow strictly what Srila Prabhupada asked us to follow, and we really give this life to Krishna, then there's no obstacle or hindrance for us not to go back to Godhead in this lifetime. But of course, sometimes devotees may still have certain attachments, and it may, as per Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, it may result in what we will be thinking about. We will get that desire of our great desire of our mind may lead us to this form of the body, but by mercy of the Lord, not only in the Srimad Bhagavatam, like in case of King Bharat, we also see it in the case of Satyavrata, the king who became Vivasvata Manu. We also see it in the case of even like today's recent examples. So there's those interesting testimonies. But the important thing is that we still get an access to the spiritual knowledge, the same spiritual knowledge, because that the same Bhagavad Gita, as Prabhupada's pointed that for one, that same knowledge which you are hearing, which Krishna repeated to Arjuna 5,000 years ago, and of course Arjuna couldn't kind of comprehend it immediately. He said, "Why, Krishna? Isn't it? I mean, you born just kind of recently, and Vivasvan, the sun god, is kind of like millions of years ago. Do I get it correct that you said the same knowledge?" And then Krishna explains, yes, because I remember all the births, and I'm eternal, I'm the source, and like that. You don't remember that, but yes, that's me, the same person with telling this knowledge. So that's the greatest benefit. And if you think about it, just think about it. Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam, Pavitramuttamam, that this knowledge is the purest, and it's sacred. It's a great mysterious knowledge. And it was only given, Raja, it was given to the kings, to the dynasties. In that same dynasty, the Raghu dynasty, Lord Ramachandra takes birth later, of Ikshvaku. So same lineage. Can you imagine how great it is? That same knowledge we have access today by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and Guru Parampara and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who has decided to spread it wide and give it access to everybody. So we are very, very lucky because we have access to the knowledge which was only given to the kings and sages. And then them, of course, they have ensured that the whole society is made in such a way that by living this knowledge, the piety is in society and everybody can elevate the consciousness gradually. Varnashrama Dharma system. But I just found it fascinating. I thought to share it today with you because Prabhupada speaks about the Manus and the different times, like how long it takes, this life, that life. So I thought to give you that example of such a vrata because I found when I read it first time, I didn't notice it somehow or other. But when I read second time Bhagavatam, by reading this, it kind of illuminated me from within. I was like, wow, I mean, this is just amazing. This is amazing how Lord is taking care of his devotees on all levels. So I thought to share this with you, and I wanted to leave time for your contributions, also questions potentially. So maybe I'll talk to this part now. Dasa is excited. Hare Krishna.
Else has any comments?
Please.
No one else. Yeah, if no one else has got any comments, I have a few thoughts. Not a lot, but I was really impressed by this purport. Prior to reading this, I was reading commentary of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and his commentary for this verse was very short. He mentioned, as Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport, he also refers to this commentary, and so he says, by pleasing Shiva through praising him, Daksha regained his power and body. That is described here. Praksarge Kala Vidrute means when the fifth Manvantara ended and the old creation was destroyed by the will of the Lord, Kalataha. He was born during Swayambhuva Manvantara. Austerity is until the fifth Manvantara, with a desire to regain his previous powers. In the sixth Manvantara, his austerities bore fruit. So my first thought was that, wow, this is an incredible time scale. Gain his previous powers, he had to perform austerities for an extraordinary period of time. So, I imagine his powers must be very substantial. Just an amazing time period. So then I wanted to know more details of, I thought, well, it would be great to know, the actual schedule of the various manus and so on. And so then I read this morning's verse, and there it was all laid out very nicely by Srila Prabhupada, all the given. So personally, I don't have the capacity to retain these kinds of details of information, but I like to know where I can find it for future reference. So I made a note of this particular verse, which in the purport details, we have the specific sequence of the various manus and the extraordinary time scale, which is the other thing that really impresses me about this. And I think it's kind of unique to our Vaishnava philosophy that you don't typically find time scales like this described in other religious systems. The time scale may be large, but not as large as what you find in the Vedic literature. There, the time scale is astoundingly large. It's unbelievable and inconceivable. This was back in the must have been late 70s. Astrophysicist Carl Sagan produced a television series called Cosmos, and he numerous times made reference to the Vedic literature. He appreciated the fact that other religious systems did not cosmology on the kind of extraordinary time scale that you find in the Vedic literature. And he was impressed by this because he felt that the Vedic conception comported very nicely with the most modern understanding of cosmologists, that the time scale that they understand is quite similar as far as the creation of the universe and so on. I thought that was interesting. Anyway, the time scale is astounding. Is really an amazing thing, but what we're getting from this purport, you know, talking about just a single day of Lord Brahma is extraordinary. It's inconceivable, but that's just one day out of Brahma's lifetime of 100 years, and he is just one Brahma out of countless Brahmas in innumerable universes that cycle endlessly again and again and again without end. So the really big picture is, it's inconceivable, of course, but it just boggles the mind to think about it all. It's extraordinary. Anyway, those are some of my impressions. I don't really have much else to contribute. I am just a bear of very little brain, so I was interested to hear what you have to say. And I want to thank you for a very nice class. I appreciated that very much. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Tarka Prabhu. So I calculated how many years Daksha performed austerity, and it comes to 1,226,880,000,000 years or something like that. If I get the numbers right, maybe it's 222 billion or something. Anyway, it's like just for one offense, right? For one of, of course, Mahadev and best of Vaishnavas, big offense, but just to see how 4 Manvantaras he had to perform to regain the strength back in order to actually continue his service as a demigod or as a Prajapati, a devotee. And I was just thinking, because I recently heard a story of one devotee. He was openly sharing his story that he was working in BBT in Russia for maybe 4 years. So he's devoted from 1991 or 1990, maybe 80s, late 80s. And then with some turbulence in 1998 and then some other events, he left the practice of devotional service. And not only he left it, the way he left it is because he was very badly mistreated. He words, and they were a curse. And he said that all that I have gained in this practice of devotional service, all the piety and strength, I'm ready to give it up just for, that person to, I don't know, suffer or whatever. So he's sharing now 20 years later, for 20 years, that how cheaply we sometimes trade what all the blessings and all the knowledge that we're getting for a stupid act of rage or a stupid act of the anger, uncontrolled anger, even if it's righteous kind of thing that he was mistreated and he's like saying it back, but he said, I basically traded it. And 20 years I was out of devotional service completely, of life, and even breaking certain regulative principles, like he started to smoke, for example. Even for 1 year he was a meat eater. So, but then he got back to vegetarian diet. But only now he's like coming back to a situation when he's reading Srimad Bhagavatam deeply and sometimes chanting again, but not like regularly, but just sometimes. So, but he was sharing it very, very interesting and openly, and I found it fascinating, again, as an example of how, those devotees sharing their, somebody's sharing good experience, how they went through life with Krishna all the time. But some devotees are sharing their topsy-turvy road of a path of bhakti. And it's a good example for us to, yes, we read about Daksha, his offense and trillion years of going through those austerities, penances to get the power back. But we can see that, it's very much relevant to our lives. And devotees who have went through this path of, making offenses and then gaining the strength and intelligence and everything back, it's actually not bad that in this lifetime, after 20 years, he has managed to, come back to the senses, you can say, to Krishna conscious. So in that way, even that offense maybe was not like extremely bad, that it took him lives and lives from Manvantaras to get back to devotional service. It could be that bad, right? So, but his words having this vijnana of regret, that he's regretting this kind of stupid act of giving all those blessings he had managed to gain through the path of devotional service, done for 10 years or whatever years, in 90s, 80s. So yes, this is I think it's a good sign of a first-class intelligence that we are able to learn through others' mistakes. Prabhupada explains it in Pandashamrita, very detailed, about those three divisions of intelligence. One learning just from hearing, others learning through their experience. And unfortunately, majority of us come to this category, like myself in that category, hopefully learning, sometimes not from the first time even. Sometimes I make repetitive mistakes. So, this second-class intelligence, or, second comma 8 or whatever intelligence, almost the third intelligence, which is never learning. Well, hopefully, some mercy of devotees, we are learning a little bit, but slowly but steadily, but hopefully can be a little bit faster, or eventually raise to that first class when we can actually learn by hearing Shastra and learning, because there are so many intricate situations where we can learn from those mistakes of great souls, like Indra and others. They're great souls, and those stories are for us to learn. So, and sometimes if it's not enough for us, we can see it's happening right here in front of our eyes. Same thing, just on a smaller scale. So let's not lose this ability to learn. Thank you, Tarki Prabhu.
Wonderful point.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we imagine that the course of our progress in Krishna consciousness is going to be more or less straight. And I think more often than not, that's not the case, that there are all kinds of things that happen that interrupt our progress. And sometimes setbacks be very, very substantial. All kinds of offenses, learned from reaction to those offenses, and the setbacks have been terrible. To this day, I'm struggling to try to recover from offenses of decades ago, and was it Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16, text 21, describes the three gateways to hell, which include anger, greed. Many pitfalls. We have to be very, very careful. Wonderful. My own experience has been that, as you say, I've had to learn by practical experience, just by one bad experience, but I've had to go through it numerous times for it to sink in because I'm so dense somehow. Offenses are so serious, so very serious. I think that in decades of practicing Krishna consciousness, I think is, for me at least, most critical. Because the course of cultivating Krishna consciousness can be very smooth and swift, but it tends not to be because of offenses. And there's all different kinds of offenses, but offenses towards Vaishnavas are a particularly serious impediment. And the tendency is there. We sometimes through accidents, through negligence, through just unconsciousness, we may commit offense, but sometimes there may actually be some envy in our heart. It's a difficult thing to overcome. Kind of a catch-22, because, the solution is Krishna consciousness, a pure heart in Krishna consciousness, but to acquire that, to apply yourself properly, also requires a pure heart in Krishna consciousness. But the process is very wonderful, given us a wonderful process, and he's made it very simple. He's condensed everything to the precipitated essence, and previous acharyas also have very, very greatly simplified the process of Krishna consciousness. There's actually so much to know. The details, it's astounding if you look at some of the Vedic literature and all the extraordinary information, the amount of information that's there. And when you look at it, when you read it, you think, my God, this is all so critical. I need to know this. Every bit of this is so wonderful and important and has such a profound bearing on my life. It seems indispensable. But the volume of it is so great that we can't wrap our heads around it. It's not possible in this age for us to remember all these things and what to speak of acting on it. I've dabbled a little bit in some various scriptures. Is very impressed. Recently, Agari Krishna was asking me for a copy of Garuda Purana. A relative of his was interested in a particular subject matter that's covered in that Purana, and so I gave him a copy with some directions and explanations, and I was inspired to read some portions of it, and my God, it's just astounding. When Srila Prabhupada gives us instructions that are seeds, like a banyan seed, a banyan tree can grow to cover many, many acres, immense trees. but it comes from an incredibly tiny seed, little tiny seed, like a, even smaller than the size of a mustard seed, very small seed. Srila Prabhupada's instructions are like that. These tiny seeds that carry so much, and but for us to benefit from them, we have to take them seriously and apply them. They encompass a tremendous amount of instruction and practices that are beyond our ability to comprehend, to remember, to practice. But by one simple thing, we cover all of that. So, for example, if Srila Prabhupada gives us the instruction to remain internally and externally clean, and specifically how to do that. We bathe regularly. You bathe first thing in the morning, bathe so many times a day, depending on your status, and clean cloth, and applying tilak, and you keep your environment clean. You clean the floor every day. Srila Prabhupada actually, I'll tell you a quick story, if I can make it quick. In Mayapur, it's a long story, but I'll try to make it short. Prabhupada was chastising the devotees one morning in Mayapur. He had noticed that there was one building, the kitchen facilities were for the mass prasad distribution, and the women's upstairs from there. So there's a stairway, and he noticed the stairway was dirty, it was dusty, and he demanded to know why is this not clean? And the devotees explained, well, we just cleaned it yesterday. Srila Prabhupada said, but it's dirty now. Why is it dirty? Why has it not been cleaned this morning? And the devotee said, well, this is, Srila Prabhupada's morning walk. So it's first thing in the morning. This is before greeting the deities. Srila Prabhupada's taking his walk, and he detects this. And this kind of thing happened on a regular basis. And I happened to be there to witness. I was sick, lying on a gurney just a few feet away. The devotee said, well, the devotees were chanting their rounds, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada said, no, that's not the system. First thing you do every day, the first thing is to clean every day. First you clean, then you chant your rounds. This was, a shocking revelation to most of the devotees. They were thinking, well, my rounds are the first order of business. But Srila Prabhupada said, no, cleaning is the first order of business. Then you chant your rounds. So anyway, cleaning, if you read the Vedic literature, the importance of cleanliness becomes clearer, and you understand that it's actually incredibly critical, very, very critical, that so much depends upon it, and you can't make any advancement without that. Srila Prabhupada said, if you are unclean, God is 1,000,000 miles away. Hare Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you very much, Sarka Prabhu. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Krishna Bhakti Namo Vishnu-padaya Krishna-prasthaya Kirtanya Prabhu Nityananda Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Mathura Dham ki jai. God, come to my own way. Blessed day, after the key. Come away from the remedy. It I go. It's not. Lord, I'm sorry. All glories to the Son of the Lord. All glories to the Son. All glories to the Son of the Lord. All glory.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, wishing you a very splendiferous Krishna conscious day.